the only podcast in India where we bring a new founder on every episode to talk about their journey and their story of building a startup. And today we have with us Vivek Mehra, who is the co-founder and CTO at Onlygood.ai, which is a cloud-based technology platform for companies to monitor and reduce their carbon footprint. Hi, Vivek. Welcome to ELI.
Hi, Priya. Thank you for having me on your podcast. Glad to be here.
It's our honor, sir. So, first, I must say the kind of work that you are doing is really making a change. It's making the world a greener space, and I think is the corporates which are now trying to become more greener, reduce the carbon footprint, and I think you are helping them by utilizing AI. So kudos to you for that work. And let's get started. Uh, to start with, I would love to hear about your background, about your experience right from childhood. Um, where all did you, first of all, where were you born and brought up? Where did you study? And what all work that you have done prior to entrepreneurship?
So I was born and brought up in Delhi for the most part. I spent a few formative years in Southern Africa where my parents were actually teaching at
Mhm.
university. I graduated from Delhi University, Hindu College, and then actually moved to the US where I spent a good 2 decades. I studied computer science and physics, and then management. Went to a bunch of places, University of Massachusetts, University of Georgia, Harvard,
Wow.
MIT, Sloan School of Management. I began my career on Wall Street consulting with the large banks, actually on the New York Stock Exchange, literally. So spent a lot of time working on the technology side of large finance, large pharma, manufacturing, retail, and so on, a little bit in Europe. And I came back to India in 2010 to lead the architecture practice for NTT Data, where I worked for several years. It's a big Japanese firm, as you would know, very big in India.
Mhm.
And I met my partner there, Rajiv Sinha. He is a co-founder at Onlygood. I was part of the digital team. I led the digital team globally, and then he was part of the supply chain practice. We got together, his background and mine, much later. I think we started this company in 2022, but the platform and the technology we were building happened much earlier than that. So the reason the company was formed and sort of the impetus for getting into sustainability was, I think both Rajiv and myself, we were very sustainably minded in that
Mhm.
we did a lot of CSR type initiatives, planting trees, not just environmental sustainability, but also sustainability of livelihoods, education, community upliftment. I used to work with the America India Foundation, for example. We did a lot of fundraising for a lot of Indian NGOs and things like that. And through that, we realized that there was some white space in the sustainability world as regards to large corporations that
Mhm.
were getting clean chits, qualitative clean chits,
Right.
saying that, look, you're doing, fine, you're all green. And there's a lot of greenwashing happening because there
Mm.
was no data to back it. And everything, if you get a qualitative report from a consultant, it's always generally good. So that
Mhm.
was the space and the part that we were trying to solve. So that is sort of the background for how Only Good happened.
Got it. Can you spend some time in understanding what is this concept of greenwashing? Why is it a mandate from a? I think it's a mandate from government to do some sort of ESG audit. How does that process happen for companies? Who sort of certifies them, and on what parameters?
If you took look at sustainability, there's all kinds of sustainability, but if you focus on environmental sustainability, which is sort of our focus, or it's called ESG, environmental, social, and governance. Within that, the what has happened over the last few years, so the space is not new, right? People have been into sustainability for years and decades. What has
Mm-hmm.
happened over the last few years is that two things. One is the planet is obviously warmer, so everybody can feel climate change. It's no longer some theoretical academic exercise. Everybody sees the unseasonal floods, the unseasonal droughts, the erratic rain, the wild fluctuations in local climates, and of course warming. The other
Mm-hmm.
thing is that the governments have become more strict. And by governments, I mean pretty much across the globe. In India, we have the Securities and Exchange Board of India bringing in the BRSR report, which is about a decade in the making, and finally saying all listed companies have to comply and disclose carbon footprints. In the EU, we have Jan 1st of 2026 when the CBAM, or the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, penalties start kicking in. We've had the CSRD in Europe. So the EU has been obviously the flag bearer for a lot of sustainability initiatives.
Right.
And even in the US, a lot of the states have net zero goals, even under the current regime where, climate is not often, front of mind, but it is even there. A lot of activity on the EV space and green energy and renewable energy and so on. India, of course, has been at the forefront, is one of the leading consumers and providers of renewable sources of
Mm-hmm.
energy. So I think we have all of these things coming into place. And the big change the regulation has done is instead of an annual report that the regulator, any regulator like the EU regulator wants, they instead of an annual quantitative report, they're saying give us a month-on-month data-backed audited report. It's almost like a financial audit where you have to
Mm-hmm.
disclose your carbon footprint and not just for your enterprise, but also for your supply chain. And when you talk about
Mm-hmm.
supply chains, these are obviously global supply chains. So if you have a manufacturer in the EU and the supplier is in India or Vietnam or Thailand or one of the emerging economies or in Brazil, they are now incumbent, it's incumbent on them to provide their carbon and the attribution to the parent buyer in the EU.
Okay.
So they're all subject to EU regulation, even if they're not in the EU. And that's a big
Mm-hmm.
change. And there are penalties for not doing it, right? The biggest penalty, of course, is the EU buyer will stop doing business with you. So this is now becoming table stakes. It's like saying, can you run a company without a financial division or having a CA create a balance sheet or an internally audited balance sheet? You can't, right? So in the same way, we are coming to an environment where you can't run a company without measuring your carbon footprint. And carbon, we should understand, is really catch-all for all kinds of data under it, right? So if we're talking energy, which is the biggest culprit in terms of carbon emissions, water, waste, transportation, and the logistics and all the suppliers upstream and downstream that any company might have. Even if it's
Right.
a services company without manufacturing, there is a certain carbon footprint. You have employees coming in to an office and so on. So the impetus has become dramatically, much larger in the last couple of years. Since 2023 is when a lot of this regulation was enacted. The Middle East has come up with penalties in May. Singapore, I think in December, announced all the listed companies in Singapore have to comply. China has their own rules. So everybody's coming up with these regulations that are country specific. And then the EU is
Mm-hmm.
the biggest one of all, where any imports into the EU will be subject to tax in certain industries.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Can you explain how does this measurement process work? How do you measure first of all the carbon footprint, and then is it just the carbon? Because there are other things are which are sort of pollutants coming out of a production process, which is not carbon, right? So how do you
Yeah.
measure the overall impact? Because it's very hard to measure first of all. Then even if you measure, you can simply manipulate the data and produce a clean sheet, a whitewashed report.
So the at the heart of it is what is called an emission factor. So the United Nations and all the signatories. So there's something called the Charter on Climate Change. UNFCCC is a forum that all the signatory countries, including India, for example, have signed on to. And what they say is, look, you have to have standard emission factors for different materials like water, like certain types of waste, metal waste, cloth waste, etc. So when you consume or through a business activity any of these items, you emit a certain amount of carbon. So producing 1 liter of water will require a certain emission of carbon. Now, that emission factor varies by country, by region. In India, it's one common factor for for a specific item. But it could
Mm-hmm.
be for large countries like the US or China, different regions will have different emission factors. So it's simply a multiplier that you add to the actual unit. So while is measured in what is called TCO2 or tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. So to your point, it's not just carbon we are measuring, it's actually it's a moniker for measuring all the other poisonous gases, sulfur, dioxide, etc., all of those, plus all of the inherent water and waste and transportation, all of that is covered in it. And there are certain rules. We follow what is called the GHG, or the Global Greenhouse Protocol, under which these emission factors reside. And you have to capture the data from all these different sources. You have to
Mm-hmm.
convert it to a TCO2e number, add it up. And of course, the numbers add up differently because if you're in different parts of the globe, or your supply chains are in different parts of the globe, all of these things come together and you have a carbon footprint for an enterprise. You do the same thing for your suppliers. So if you're a large auto manufacturer, OEM, and you have, let's say, 5,000 suppliers across the globe, well, then you need to have at each tier of those suppliers, you need to do the same process. So as you can see,
Mm-hmm.
it's very difficult to do that in consultative manner or trying to get that data into Excel month on month. It's just not possible. And so large part of this is the data collection, the collation, the harmonization, applying the emission factors, which also, by the way, change every 6 months. And then following an ISO process that says, okay, how is this data collected? How is it verified? Do you keep evidence with it? So, for example, you say, I burnt 100 kilowatt hours of electricity. Well, can you show me proof of it? Is there an electricity invoice? What type of electricity was it? So it gets complicated. And when, especially when you talk about suppliers, because as a supplier, I may provide to 100 companies. What is the
Right.
attribution of my production to each company is an allocation I have to do, and I have to do it month on month. So that's the computation that we do. And
Mm-hmm.
that results in essentially a compliance report, or it can be a forecast for decarbonization or a decarbonization pathway. Uh, because the hope is everybody wants to get to net zero at some point.
Mm-hmm. Got it. I understand Onlygood uses IoT, computer vision, and ERP integration. So these are the three components of, first of all, capturing data. On top of that, you use AI to analyze the data and come up with reports. Can you spend little time in explaining what these individual components do? How do they measure the data points before analyzing them, compiling them through AI?
It's like if you have a plumbing system and you want, and you open the faucet and you drink the water, right? How do you know it's safe to drink? And that's our focus, right? So data veracity, data timeliness, data quality, data safety and privacy, all of those things are of concern. And at every step of the way, as the data is collected, you need to make sure that one, it is of course the right data. There may be gaps in it, and you have to flag those gaps. So there's associated workflows. So where these technologies help is that if you can reduce or eliminate the human intervention and get data directly from a machine, then you know how much carbon that machine is emanating, or that assembly line, or that plant, or whatever. So that's where IoT devices or sensors come into play. And computer vision is in the context of being able to read bills and invoices and the evidences and making sense of them, so that when
Mm-hmm.
the auditor comes in to check, because there's an auditing aspect to this as well, and verifies that yes, these are indeed your emissions that you reported. You can drill down and say, okay, who entered this? What timestamp? Can you show me evidence? Just like a financial audit would take place. That's why it's
Mm-hmm.
important to collate all of these, and ERP integration, because ERPs in most large companies are systems of record for data like this. It's a different matter that sometimes ERPs are maybe homegrown and they may not have that veracity, but it forces the culture. So out of, it's important to know there's a very strong behavioral aspect to this, right? The problem with data, any kind of data, really, even financial data, is that nobody wants to share it. They don't see an immediate ROI. And while
Right.
there may be compliance, how do you have it percolate down a supply chain? So there's a behavioral aspect. Our job is to make it easy and almost
Mm-hmm.
painless to enter the data, or the data gets entered automatically. So automation is a big aspect of this whole platform.
And how about AI? Let's say you have all the data points together, and what sort of AI models that you use to analyze the data and
So model for sustainability. And while there are some fledgling efforts to start that, there is really no data in this space because it's never been collected, unlike financial services or manufacturing or other aspects. So we are building our own. There are other companies that are building our own. Part of it, a large part of our AI exercise is as a native AI platform, is to embed it in all functions of our organization, including carbon capture, data collation, forecasting, and analysis, providing guidance on how to mitigate the carbon till the end game of where you have an exchange where you want to list and monetize the credits that you may have accumulated on your while you became net zero. You have certain processes and businesses that actually become net zero and become carbon positive, and you can list those on an exchange. So that is the flow of how we'd like an organization to progress. How we use AI is really pretty much in every function of our organization, but in the context of carbon mitigation, certainly in the forecasting and analysis space, the data is sparse, though it is very difficult to train models because there is not much out there. The space is just beginning,
Mhm.
but that is our objective to be able to create that.
Got it. I think I read it somewhere that you have opened an office in Dubai, um, and you are planning to move internationally. But the way I think is, India, yes, India is very ambitious with the green initiatives, net zero goals. But there are other countries out there which are much more aggressive, which are trying to, go net zero even before 2030. Where do you see a lot of traction happening internationally? Which are the countries which are going aggressive with ESG and net zero
I
emissions?
think for us,
Uh,
where we are being, yeah,
yeah, go
yeah.
ahead.
So I think for us, the markets, I mean, India, of course, is a very, very big market. There's a lot of awareness. Every month it grows. There's a lot of press. You can see it in the Economic Times. You can see all the publications. Our clients come to us, with a lot of urgency, I would say. But everything is pointing to an international market for us. I mean, while we are homegrown here in Haryana, India, we are a global company. The emission factors are not regional, they are global. So, we already have those embodied in the system. We are ready for global compliances. Our reporting engine can take on different skins and report in different countries and languages. So, to that extent, we see a lot of potential in the Middle East. They've just in May of this year announced penalties for non-disclosure of carbon footprints. The same thing in the EU, they are further ahead. So I think Western Europe, even parts of North America are right markets. South Asia is very big, Southeast Asia, as is the Middle East. So our goal is to be able to expand in these markets beyond also manufacturing and look at other industries, such as financial services, where
Mhm.
we are going to look at how to de-risk a portfolio from a carbon standpoint. So I think there is a general awareness that was missing, I think, even last year, till last year. There is an
Mhm.
urgency with the penalties kicking in from Jan 1st of 2026. There are some proposals. There's an omnibus proposal from the EU that's, you know, relaxing some requirements for small to medium-sized companies, but it's not going away. The UK, for example, is not relaxing its rules. So I think this will be an inflection year for us, this one and the next, where we should see a lot of growth.
Got it. I was also reading through some of the testimonials which are displayed on your website, perhaps. I think one of your clients has mentioned that they have cut down the operational cost by 15%. I just want to understand how does reducing carbon footprint reduces the cost as well. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so I think what a lot of people don't realize is that they don't have to wait for compliance to kick in, or if you're not one of the listed companies on the Indian Stock Exchange and you don't have to fill in the BRSR report, doesn't mean you shouldn't be in the sustainability space or have your functions sustainability as a competitive advantage. And the simple reason is that carbon becomes a lens for energy optimization, because one of the big culprits in emissions is energy. The moment you start measuring something, you can improve it. So, for example, if you have 20 plants and let's say all of them are roughly the same production capacity, why is it that some of them have lower carbon emissions? Well, then you start to
Mhm.
peel the onion and you say, okay, that's because we're using a little more solar here. We have different supplier base here. Maybe they are using, recyclable materials. So the attribution to us is lower carbon. So it's in very simplistic terms, you can see immediately the hotspots. It's like saying, okay, I'm going to try to drive my car without a dashboard. Well, once you put the dashboard in and you see the speed limit, now if you're going fast or slow. Without measuring, you don't know. So just the act of measurement alone is enough. And then when you see where the fossil energy is coming from, and you get the ROI in 2, 3 years or even sooner, you start to see immediate benefits, even if you're not going to be doing this for compliance. If you're just doing it out of a sense of energy optimization, you get an immediate ROI.
Mhm.
So, and that's simply because energy is the biggest culprit when it comes to carbon emission. If you can transition to renewable without large capex, and sometimes the capex it pays for itself. There are OPEX models as well that we recommend. So, in short, I think it's carbon is an euphemism for energy conservation and optimization.
Right. How do you advise startups to go about the sustainability goals? Because I think when you become mid-size or a large corporate, then only you realize the role of sustainability, ESG mandates, and all. I think startups rarely worry about these things. How would you advise them to think about it?
So I think it should be front and center. Honestly, I don't think it is an optional. It's an aspect of your business. Just like you would not think of running a company without a C advisor. There's no point in running a company without being sustainable. We're a zero waste company. We use our own, we are close to net zero ourselves. Our CEO Rajiv, he comes to the office on a bicycle. So we practice what we preach, and we find tremendous savings, and we align our personal purpose with that of the company and of our clients and partners. And there is a lot of impact that a small company can create just by using mindful, sustainable practices. But the financial aspect is also very clear. I mean, these days, investors look to your sustainability credentials. And I know of cases where a Series B or Series C funding is held up because you don't have the data to back your sustainability initiatives.
Got it. And finally, before we close, just one last question. You are an entrepreneur yourself, and you also mentor startups with NASCOM. How would you advise other entrepreneurs to go about their ventures? What is one single advice that you would give to other entrepreneurs?
I think I think of course the obvious thing is a lot of perseverance, because you can be too early to the market or too late, right? You don't control those things. When you have that passion and you want to solve a problem that's big enough to solve, when you start on that journey, I think perseverance is obviously a key thing. But the only advice I would give is stay true to your mission and
Mhm.
have a clear definition of purpose. And everything else will fall in line. Without having a clear definition of why you're doing this, and is it something that is just short term, that you want to make a quick buck, or you want to become the next unicorn? I think that I don't personally believe in that sort of a vision. I think there has to be a deeper meaning. Like for us, we really want to impact and help companies grow sustainably. Now, growth and sustainability are generally oxymorons, right? If you're going to grow, you're going to emit more. It's all common
Yes.
sense. But we want to find a way that that's not true. It seems like an impossible ask, but then again, every country, every company has said, oh, we want to be net zero by so and so. But really, what is it on the ground? Are your goals and your trajectory aligned? Are you headed the right way? And for any company as well that's starting out, whether in the sustainability or clean tech space or anywhere else, you have to be true to your mission. There's a reason you start a company, right? Which is to solve a problem. Well, stay true to that. Find the purpose, get more clarity, stay with the cause. It will require perseverance. The market may not warm up right away. Um, but I think in the end, it will be worth it, is what I would say.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Vivek. It was a pleasure to have you on our platform. And I think the work you are doing is really
Thank you.
uh, re- really good for the planet Earth, and it's taking our country and the whole world forward. Thanks again for joining.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you for having me. Cheers. Bye.